And to chair the session this morning, I invite our Deputy Chairman of Integrity Commission Grenada, Mr. Robert Robinson. Deputy.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Sandy David. And let me extend a welcome to Dr. Roger Corrington, the Interim Advisor and Head of Public Sector Governance of the Commonwealth Secretariat, at the head table right there, the male at the head table. Mr. Dirk Harrison, Chairman of the Commonwealth Caribbean Association of Integrity Commissions and Anti-Corruption Bodies, and representatives of the AIB. It's all right, one of these days I'll get it right. And Mr. David Hollycoff, Director of Grant Thornton, who would be, I better leave that for the chairman of the next session to do. Lady Ananda Trotman Joseph, Chairman of the Integrity Commission Grenada. We have permanent secretaries and senior managers of the government service. The day one of our Integrity Commission Center for Excellence series, we had with us senior managers, I should say members of the Integrity Commission, the staff of the Integrity Commission, and the heads and representatives of several government departments. Day two, we had a continuation of that session, and we had a presentation from the Deputy Prime Minister. Yesterday, the third day of our session, we had representatives from statutory bodies. So you see, we try to get the Integrity Commission, try to get as many people as possible to understand what is corruption and how corruption should be dealt with. And that is why we have these senior people with us. Today, we have representatives of who are our stakeholders. And we have invited representatives from legal affairs, from Parliament, from the police force, the FIU, the Public Service Commissions, international anti-corruption bodies, the Commonwealth Association of Anti-Corruption Bodies, external consultants, the court system, and the Office of the Ombudsman. We also had invited faith-based organizations, as we consider them to be one of our stakeholders. However, it is not, I believe that the when I was introduced by Mrs. Sandy David, she said, a short introduction, and I don't want to disappoint her. So I think at this stage I would call on Mr. Robert Finley, who is the Investigations and Compliance Officer of the Integrity Commission, to provide the invocation. Mr. Finley.
Could you stand, please? O merciful God and Father in heaven, this morning as we are gathered together, Lord, we do acknowledge your presence, your omnipotence and omniscience in all things. Indeed, your word declared that in thee all things do consist. And so we approach your throne of grace in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. We thank thee for health and strength and blessings, the mercies we take for granted day by day. It's all because of your divine love and mercy towards us, the human race. So as we are gathered this morning, O Father, that we might deliberate once again on matters concerning integrity and anti-corruption, Lord, we pray for a blessing and enablement on those who would present, and that all that would be said and done will redound to the benefit of each of us participants and to our countries. We pray for this blessing, and we give you thanks for all your grace and mercy towards us, in the name of our Lord and our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Finley. I don't think it is necessary for me to, and in keeping with the instructions of Mrs. Sandy David, to say too very much about our chairman, Lady Ananda Trotman Joseph, is the chairman of the Grenada Integrity Commission. She is the live wire, I need to say, of our organization. She has put in a lot. She has done a lot. She is recognized, I should say, throughout the Commonwealth Caribbean for her work in anti-corruption matters. And today, the fourth session of our National Anti-Corruption Roundtable Mechanism, I call on Lady Ananda Trotman Joseph to address us.
Thank you very much, Chairman, of this morning's proceedings. And this morning, I must say that indeed it is my pleasure to once again be at this podium. I did take a break yesterday for those of you who were here because of other pressing duties, and that was in the morning. But I surely did not take a break for the rest of the afternoon and evening, when I spent that time mainly with our overseas participants of this 4-day training activity. But before we start upon my remarks, indeed I bring you greetings, all of you, and a warm welcome on this day, because we have been welcoming many of you for the last 3 days, but a warm welcome on this day 4 of our training activity that is spearheaded by the Virtual Center of Excellence series under the sponsorship of the Commonwealth Secretariat and the Integrity Commission of Grenada in collaboration with the Department of Public Administration. And the public administration, they are the focal point for the Commonwealth Secretariat in Grenada. So, once again, I will share my salutations and welcome to Dr. Roger Corenteng, who is here with us at the head table. And we single him out because not only have we given him honorary citizenship, but he is here with us now. This would be the 5th year that he is facilitating this high-level leadership course. We have as well Mr. Dirk Harrison, who is the chairman of the Commonwealth Caribbean Association of Integrity Commissions and Anti-Corruption Bodies, and is, of course, here representing the CCAI-CAB and giving us technical cooperation by facilitating a lot of what we do. Our other guests include the chairman of the Guyana's Integrity Commission, Chairman Durisami, and he has come with, bearing with him, Mrs. Rosemary Benjamin Noble, and she's a commissioner of the Integrity Commission of Guyana, and the CEO secretary of that commission, Mrs. Amanda Jaising, as well. I recognize as well our contingents from St. Lucia, Dominica, and Jamaica, and we will ask them to introduce themselves to you as we progress. We have with us as well Mr. David Holokoff, who is the director of Grant Thornton, and he has taken time out of his very, very busy schedule, flying all over the region, doing a lot of regional work, to be with us to discuss a very important topic this morning. I know we have with us members of the legal fraternity, and we do have our learned, and I would say this in terms of the time that they have arrived into our session and to our roundtable session, our learned Director of Public Prosecutions, Mr. Christopher Nelson, QC. I see the learned Attorney General, Mr. Darshan Ramdani. We have here as well from that legal sector, the lead expert on anti-corruption for the OAS MISSISSIC mechanism, as well as the UNCAC UNODC mechanism for Grenada, Mr. Robert Branch from the Ministry of Legal Affairs. We have with us our ombudsman this morning. I did see her coming in, and she's a very key player in this sector. We have permanent secretaries. We have, of course, all of you that I'm referring to here now are members or stakeholders of a roundtable mechanism. We should have with us a representative, and I do believe I see him, from the statistics department. We have the head of the Financial Intelligence Unit, and this particular organization, I single it out as even as I welcome you all, because the FIU has been playing a very, very leading and meaningful role in our anti-corruption sector here in Grenada. They are at the vanguard as we all begin to join this circle of security and anti-corruption. We did have yesterday a representative, well, day before yesterday rather, representative of the Commission of Police. We should have a representative, I see here, from Customs, and he's here with us, and we welcome you. We did get your message that you were unable to be a part of the first sessions. We should have with us a representative from our Transparency International local group. We have representatives from the Human Rights Organization. We have invited representatives from the Bankers Association. We have a representative or representatives from civil society, the Interagency Group of Development Organizations of the Civil Society Organization, and staff, commissioner, deputy chair, and other commissioners who are on their way to join us, I'm sure, staff of the Integrity Commission, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, all. So there I have set the tone of everyone who should be here in a round table setting. We know there's no perfect system, and there's no perfection as we live. Those of us who have lived long enough surely know this. So even though this morning we are a smaller, tighter unit, we are meeting in Grenada's setting that is called a round table mechanism, which was launched last November by Dr. Corenting on behalf of the Commonwealth Secretariat. The round table on this day 4 is a much smaller, more interactive, more discoursive, more honest, we believe and hope, interaction. And though we are a bit oblong this morning, really and truly, it is our intention that we circle our issues of anti-corruption. Like I said before, there is no perfect system. If there was, we would not be on this earthly plane. We would all have come in with our little wings to have our first meal of milk and honey this morning. So that is not the case. And that is why we have and are attempting through our joint efforts and our joined up actions to build out an anti-corruption system and a wider sector, not only here in Grenada, but because we have the regional stakeholders, we are now speaking together and sharing together our best practices, our aspirations, our ideals, and our realities in this one space that we call this morning our round table mechanism. And as we begin our day's work, we need to reflect on why we have this round table. We have this round table because you are all here as representatives. I'm sorry, I now see the representative of the Commissioner of Police who I was looking for that way because that's where I last saw him sitting. We are all here together in this mechanism, this round table mechanism this morning, because we are leaders in our own rights. And I share with you as we begin our discourses the words of John Maxwell, that leadership guru, who says, everything rises and falls on leadership. Everything. Sometimes, even as we build out systems, things don't always go the way we expect. Situations arise that were never contemplated. Things come at us, projectiles of words and sometimes even stones and bullets, as those of you in this sector would know, and we have Deputy Superintendent from the MOCA who is here. We have, and from Jamaica, we have, of course, our local law enforcement, not only from the RGPF, but of course from the FIU. And in security work, that is a subsector of a wider anti-corruption sector, we know that projectiles will come. Speaking with Deputy Superintendent Reed from MOCA, Jamaica, he says every day and every morning he prays against violence and he binds all of those projectiles that come from the enemy. The enemies of who are bad actors, and the enemies that really want to turn back the forward momentum of the work that we do. So I'm setting the tone for you to understand that as we leaders of a round table, speaking today and going forward with respect to how we can best strategize to have a better sector, better anti-corruption sector, we must understand that being leaders of this sector means standing in faith and courage You must be convinced and be passionate about what you do. So, having spoken more about that kind of philosophical framework that is required, let me touch a little bit more specifically about the legal issues and frameworks that will guide this sector. We shared before that Grenada and most of the Caribbean, the Commonwealth Caribbean, not all but most, would have acceded firstly to the Inter-American Convention Against Corruption. We're hearing this. We're seeing the laws, but what is the purpose? It's very important that we understand the purpose of what we're doing. Because sometimes at the end side of it, if we don't understand what began it all, we can lose our way and we may not build out the best cohesive, holistic strategy to fight corruption, to understand corruption, and to be pragmatic about how we are going to lead our fight against corruption. The purposes of this regional convention are to promote and strengthen the development by each of the states parties of the mechanisms needed to prevent, detect, punish, and eradicate corruption. To promote, facilitate, and regulate cooperation among the states parties to ensure the effectiveness of the measures and actions to prevent, detect, punish, and eradicate corruption in the performance of public functions and acts of corruption specifically related to such performance. So this first convention really speaks very much to the public sector, focusing on public officials, government officials, and public officers who perform public functions, whether permanent, temporary, paid, or honorary. So that is the Inter-American Convention. And as I shared before, the mechanism or process which has oversight for the implementation of the convention is the MISSISIC, which mechanism is headquartered in Washington, D.C., at the OAS headquarters there. But most of the Commonwealth Caribbean, or more of the Commonwealth Caribbean territories, because in our regional association, we have interactions coming from Anguilla, Cayman Islands, Turks and Caicos, BVI, Montserrat, and so on, and we come all the way through. Well, there's Belize at the other end of that, but we're coming all the way through the Caribbean, the CARICOM region as well as these British dependencies, and all the way down to Guyana. So most or more of these territories would have therefore ratified the UN Convention Against Corruption. Here in Grenada, Grenada acceded to that convention in 2015. And many of you here would have been part of the implementation exercises which are being overseen by the UNODC, which is the mechanism for the implementation or the oversight body. When I say mechanism, the oversight body which gives the impulse and the pulses to implement these treaties. So I share with you too what is the purpose of the UNCAC as stated in that convention. And I will share with you very briefly about UNCAC. UNCAC now is picking up a lot of speed because it has, as of last year, 140 signatories. It covers 5 main areas, and they require our states to address prevention. We keep hearing prevention, and I know that Dr. Corentin will share with you more today about those models and what they mean. Criminalization and law enforcement measures, international cooperation, asset recovery, and technical assistance and information exchange. So what we are learning here is that individually we are no longer islands or just small developing states. We are instead plugged into a regional network, and we are plugged into a global network. And what does this mean? This means for us that based on the visions and purposes of the conventions, that we are expected to adopt the key aspects of these treaties as well as the best practices. I must share with you that for those of us here in Grenada, sometimes it is said that a prophet is never recognized in his, and I would add, her home. But the work of this commission is being recognized abroad. Just within the last 2 weeks, Grenada's Integrity Commission was represented at a regional forum which was funded by the Canadian government and the Parl-Americas project, bringing together parliamentarians from Canada, Latin America, and the Caribbean to discuss ways in which our governments, our systems, including our anti-corruption systems, and generally public management can become more transparent. So that invitation to that session took me as the representative of the Integrity Commission literally to the middle of the world, to Quito, Ecuador, one of the world's highest cities, where we were asked to share on the work and achievements of the integrity and anti-corruption system of Grenada. According to one Canadian parliamentarian, what you are doing and your achievements there in Grenada are extraordinary. I recall others coming forward from Trinidad and St. Lucia, Belize, other Caribbean territories. They were very surprised that Grenada had been able to implement these systems and have them up and running. They were coming forward with their smartphones and taking out the PowerPoint slides, such as this one, which would have been created by our own Mrs. Dow Mitchell. And I must say that it was a proud moment when they all ran forward and they began to take the photographs of our data, which showed that we had nearly 700 persons declaring their assets and liabilities in Grenada. And when I shared with them that every parliamentarian would have declared, and many of them would now be approaching their third declaration cycle, they were in awe. And as we speak a little more today among ourselves, you will hear, for example, from St. Lucia and some of the other territories about the progress of asset declarations. We here in Grenada, as I said before, there is no perfection, but we are fast becoming a regional best practice because, in the words, and I will quote here from the soca king of the world, we run with it. Every time Dr. Korintang suggests that we have a training session, there are times when we do not have the funding, but what we have is the will. This commission has the will. So when we were asked to have the first inaugural Caribbean meeting here in Grenada, under the then chairmanship of Dame Monica Joseph, we ran with it. When Dr. Korintang said Trinidad is unable to take up chairing the next cycle, would we leave that with you? We said we will run with it. Then we set up the regional system where the treasurer came from Grenada, the secretary came from Grenada, the chair came from Grenada, and we really pressed on. Then we had another very challenging request. Can Grenada host regional training for the Commonwealth Secretariat for the regional stakeholders? That was a hard one. But we exerted the will required. We went to the authorities who were quite skeptical at the time, but we gave them the assurance that working with the Commonwealth, who would provide sponsorship for events such as this, we will make it happen. And today, it is a reality. So Grenada, and by extension, because we're receiving assistance from the Commonwealth Association, we're receiving assistance from our stakeholders, from the UNODC, we're receiving assistance from the ACB, we have to get that acronym right, and technical cooperation, because it's not just about financial assistance, we are receiving technical cooperation. And we share too that under our section 12(2)(b) of the Integrity in Public Life Act, and under the Prevention of Corruption in Public Life Act, we are also required not just to call upon these external sources of assistance, but we are mandated to look likewise internally to our local public sector and ask for help. And believe you me, we ask for help. The FIU, as I said, has been in that vanguard, and we ask for help wherever we have to. Ministry of Legal Affairs, we work, of course, not only with the lead expert on the implementation of the anti-corruption sector, we're calling, when necessary, on the Director of Public Prosecutions, who is really, in fact, the lead investigator in terms of prevention of corruption in our nation. That is the mantle that he's been given. We have to collaborate, of course, with the Learned Attorney General, because these are all legal matters, the implementation of legal frameworks. Those of you who are here or would have been with us over the last few days, especially yesterday, meeting with statutory bodies, you would know or would have heard perhaps that investigations as well as voluntary requests would have come with respect to the work of the statutory bodies here in Grenada. And as we discussed today, we can share a little bit more about that. But we have been using sometimes what we call perhaps softer tools, where we send out our questionnaires about how their systems are functioning, and then when we get back those responses, our compliance persons, such as Mr. Finley and Mrs. Dow Mitchell and others, they would know for sure whether those systems are working or not. Because we have been challenged somewhat about powers to investigate, it was only last evening when I was going through regional news that I see that the Privy Council has just handed down a judgment to Jamaica, where what was challenged was the right of the Public Service Commission to promote an officer who had been under investigation, and they did not investigate. What did they do? They promoted. And the Privy Council is saying, you commissions, all of you, not just the Police Service Commission, or the Public Service Commission, you need to observe in the course of your work that there needs to be an accountability mechanism. You need to be sure of the character of the people that you're promoting, especially in light of those allegations. So basically what we're talking about are setting standards and benchmarks, which will act as a deterrent to corruption. For us here in Grenada, inherently, we're also a commission of inquiry. We also have inherently in our legislation the right to monitor gifts that public officers are receiving. And that system, a gift Management Registry is presently being rolled out. For us, we have been big on training and development, as I said before, as evidenced by this particular training center, the first one that is a virtual center for excellence. And even as we record, we will be sharing what we are discussing here in St. George's, Grenada, with our other regional stakeholders. Because indeed, to whom much is given, much is expected. So we have to share what we're learning. Those of us who are physically here, we're calling upon you to go back and be the trainers yourself as you enter upon Train the Trainers programs about how we are going to really curb corruption in our societies. So, as I come towards closing, for us here in Grenada and throughout the region, joined up actions, stakeholder work is very, very important. Let us move from our silos, our tunnel views, our separate ways of thinking. Because, brothers and sisters, even as I was coming here this morning, I was reminded that we are one Caribbean space. We can't just build our own little organizations, whether we're public sector, whether it's a ministry, it's a department, it's a DPP's chambers, it's a Ministry of Legal Affairs, Attorney General's chambers, Ombudsman office, Integrity office. Of course we have our pride within our individual teams and offices, our CSOs, our individual NGOs. It is easy. Our individual integrity commissions and anti-corruption bodies, whether you come to us today from Guyana or Jamaica or Dominica or St. Lucia, of course we come bearing our own badges of honor and our own pride. But really and truly, if we continue to operate as silos, there is no way, absolutely no way, that we will be able to build out effective anti-corruption systems, not only nationally, but regionally and internationally. I remind you, this is one Caribbean space. And in the words of the winning road march from Trinidad, which I heard on my way here this morning, we are all family. Family. That's who we are. We are a family in terms of our approach to building out an anti-corruption sector in this region. And as I close once again with the words of the soca king of the world. And I urge you, as you have listened to these words, let us not just hear them. Let them not fall on infertile ground, but let us run with it. I thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank our chairman, Lady Ananda Trotman Joseph, for her presentation. According to the program which I have, I would now ask that we all individually identify ourselves so that there will be a proper record of all those who are with us. Because I know if I said we have the names, I have seen people come in after the start of the program. So would you please start? We start from Mr. Finley.
Good morning. I am Robert Finley. I am the Investigations / Compliance Officer at the Integrity Commission in Grenada.
Morning all, Jean Morrill, Secretary, Integrity Commission, St. Lucia.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Palestrina Roll. I am the Research Assistant Analyst at the Integrity Commission in Dominica.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Timon Charles. I'm Deputy Director of the Central Statistical Office, Grenada.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Rohan Reed. I'm a Deputy Superintendent of Police attached to the Major Organized Crime and Anti-Corruption Agency, Jamaica.
Good morning, all. My name is Kumar Durasamy. I'm the Chairman of the Integrity Commission of Guyana.
Good morning, everyone. I am Rosemary Benjamin Noble. I'm a Commissioner of the Guyana Integrity Commission.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Amanda Jysing, Secretary, Guyana Integrity Commission.
Good morning. My name is Robert Branch, Senior Legal Counsel, Attorney General's Chambers, Grenada.
Good morning, everyone. The name is Tafawa P, and I'm the head of the FIA in Grenada.
Good morning. My name is Bolan Leo Shikolu. I'm a senior auditor with the Audit Department, Grenada.
Good morning to everyone. Sorry to be late. Elvis Maureen, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture and Lands, and Acting Supervisor of Elections.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I am Elizabeth Henry Greenwich, and I'm the Operations Manager at the Office of the Integrity Commission, Grenada.
Good morning, Ayana Williams. I rapporteur. I am the rapporteur.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sandra Ferguson. I'm here on behalf of the Interagency Group of Development Organizations. I am sometimes known as a public nuisance, and I publicly confess that I have thrown stones at the Integrity Commission. And seeing that they have put it to good use, it seems that I should continue to do so.
Greetings, Joseph Roberts, part of the IAGDO, Civil Society, Grenada.
Good morning all. Shane Debbie, Deputy Controller of Customs, with the responsibility for operations.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Darshan Ramdani. I'm the Attorney General of Grenada. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ronnie Marichaud, Complaints Officer, Office of the Ombudsman, Grenada.
Good morning, everyone. My name is John Charles, Assistant Commissioner of Police, representing the RGPF.
Morning, everyone. I am John Alexander, representing the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Administrative Officer.
Good morning, Christopher Nelson, Director of Public Prosecutions, Grenada. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Chairman of the Caribbean Association of Integrity Commissions and Anti-Corruption Bodies. Presently assigned as the Director of Corruption Prosecution, Integrity Commission, Jamaica. It's Dirk Harrison.
Just going to catch our two colleagues.
Good morning to everyone. I'm Alison Miller. I'm the Acting Ombudsman for Grenada.
Good morning, John Mitchell, Acting Commissioner of Prisons.
And my colleagues.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dawn Walker, Compliance Officer, Integrity Commission, Grenada.
Good morning, everyone. Aquino Bartholomew, Legal Compliance Officer, Integrity Commission, Grenada.
Pleasant good morning and welcome again. Samorna Don Mitchell, Officer of the Integrity Commission. Compliance Officer, sorry.
And as I walk back to our chairman, my name is Eunice Sandy David, the Administrative Manager, Integrity Commission, Grenada. And for our rapporteur, may I please invite everyone to speak directly into the cordless mic for the quality of recording. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Sandy David, and thank you all for giving us information about yourselves and the positions you hold. I would now call on what I should say, my period of office here has ended, and I call on Mr. Finley, who is the Investigations Compliance Officer of the Integrity Commission, to continue in my position here as chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Commissioner, also Deputy Chairman of the Commission. And this morning, I'm pleased to present to you Mr. David Holokoff as our first presenter this morning. Mr. Holokoff is a chartered accountant, CPA, and a CFE certified fraud examiner. He's a licensed trustee in bankruptcy, Barbados and St. Vincent, and a director in Grant Thompson's Recovery and Advisory Service Group in the BVI. He has been practicing for over 20 years, with the last 17 practicing exclusively in the Caribbean. His practice extends from Trinidad in the south through to Jamaica in the north. The majority of his engagements involve assisting banks with the recovery of non-performing loans and recovering assets misappropriated through fraud and other means, with these assets being situated in a multitude of jurisdictions. Mr. Holokoff has been involved in forensic investigations and asset recovery related engagements with a variety of private sector and government clients. His practice involves a combination of forensic accounting, asset tracing, utilization of criminal proceedings, and insolvency laws to recover assets. And as we see, Mr. Holokoff has a wealth of experience. So we would welcome him to present to us on the topic of corruption perception indices and what that means, especially homing in on the Transparency International Corruption Perception Index. Mr. Holokoff.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Finley. I just wanted to start off with talking very briefly about the problem that we're here to all address, which is probably one of the biggest and most difficult problems as leaders in government bodies have to deal with in the world right now. It's, I think, something that the world has been wrestling with for some time, and I don't think anybody's really gotten close to what the right solution is. I think that Lady Trotman Joseph brought up one of the key issues, and that's leadership. And it's a real privilege to be able to speak with you all today. And when you're dealing with such a problem that we are globally, not just in the Caribbean region. This one better? Oh, sorry everybody. Is the issue of leadership, and people go, oh, I'm just one person, or I only have this amount of resources. When you're dealing with such a, what might be thought of as an insurmountable problem at times. One of my favorite examples, I think, that expresses the importance of leadership very simply is, I think we're all very familiar with the Navy SEAL training program. We've seen enough television shows and so forth about how grueling that is. And one of them told me a story once about how partway through the training session, about midway, they take the leader of the top team and the leader of the bottom team and they switch them. And they keep absolutely everything else the same. And oddly enough, what happens is the top team starts to slide down and the bottom team starts to move up. And the only thing they've changed is the leader of the team. So it's something that, as you're dealing with your challenges, something I think about repeatedly when I'm having to deal with my challenges and so forth, to try and be an effective leader and be the top team. So one of the other things that we want to talk about, I guess I wanted to split it up a bit here in terms of talking about the Corruption Perception Index and corruption itself and dealing with impunity and how we go about enforcement. I'm going to kind of break up the topic into a couple of different sections. One being dealing with the perception index a bit, and another dealing with enforcement. I'm not going to deal too much with prevention because looking at what I've seen go on today, already this morning, I think that you guys have that well in hand and are working very effectively at it. In talking about the Corruption Perception Index, I think one of the difficulties we have is its perception, for starters. And I'm very privileged in my experiences to live in Grenada and work in pretty well every English-speaking jurisdiction in the Caribbean. So I probably, for all those people visiting, I've probably been in your jurisdictions for sometimes very extended periods of time. And I've really grown to love all aspects of the Caribbean and each country. And I say that because the next couple of things I want to talk about, I don't want them to be insulting to anybody, because that's not the intent. Because what we're actually talking about is perception. And that's one of the issues we deal with, well, one of the difficult issues we deal with when we're being ranked. And I know I've had discussions with our own Integrity Commission at times and so forth about sometimes what I think the unfairness of the the index itself. And I did some research, and I'm sure you've all done some research as to how it's actually all put together. And it's not always completely transparent as to how all the numbers come together, and it comes from multiple sources. And it was a bit of a struggle sometimes. But I did notice in the Caribbean, particularly in Grenada and Barbados and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, most of the time the sources come from 3 places. Other places like Canada might have 10. As you move in Denmark and so forth, 7 and so forth. But all of a sudden when you get to about number 25, it's 3 sources. And this is where we want to have a little bit of roundtable discussion, because I'm not going to say I'm right about any of this. And I encourage a good, strong discourse in this. But I noticed when I was using one of the sources and going through it, a couple of things. And it wasn't always easy to kind of find out where all the data was coming from. And some of it, in my travels, I kind of disagreed with. I mean, I've spent probably 1.5 years of my life in St. Vincent, so I know it quite well, and I have it's one of my favorite places, but I also have some very strong views on different aspects of it. I lived in Barbados for 3 years, and I know it quite well, and I know it's going through some changes as well. Dominica for probably about, 2 or 3 months, St. Lucia for a lesser time. So I've been very privileged to be in the various countries at time and form my own views. And when I was reading through one of the sources, and I don't know how detailed everybody's gone through them, But I just wanted to kind of raise a few points and get people's thoughts about it, or just maybe reflect on it yourself. And the source is from the World Justice Project Rule of Law. They actually had some pretty good background data as to how they came up with their numbers, to a certain degree. But one of the things that you kind of saw is they gathered their information, according to them, from a survey, a series of surveys, 120,000 surveys throughout the world. But what we don't know is when they survey Grenada, at least I couldn't find it, or St. Lucia, or Trinidad, how many people responded? Or what groups were actually surveyed? Was it, randomly through, contacting perhaps attorneys? Or was it professionals? Or was it government? Or was it people in Grenville, business people? I don't know, has anybody been able to find out how those surveys are come about and who gets them? Just as a question. No? Lady Trotman?
Just sharing, Grenada for the last regional conference, Grenada had requested that the Transparency International representatives come to share with us how they really, or rather what is the transparency of their reporting. And a representative was sent from Germany, headquarters. And to be honest with you, and I know we had, I don't see Superintendent Pear was also present and had asked certain questions. And to be very honest with you, up to now, we ourselves what we saw was an opaque situation. We still don't see the transparency of the Transparency International Index methodology.
Thank you. Has anybody else tried to find out, just out of curiosity? No. So you can dig around and you can find some basic information. And like I said, the World Justice Project Rule of Law one seemed to have some at least pretty reasonable data at the top, but you still couldn't get into how it came about. And then, you'd read, and I just grabbed a couple of these. I wasn't exactly sure who was going to be here today from which countries. Oops. So I just grabbed a few countries and a few statistics. And now Grenada ranked for 2018, we were 52, I believe, in there. And Trinidad was 41, St. Vincent was 58, Barbados was 68, and Dominica was 57. I missed out. Oh, and St. Lucia was 55. So we're kind of in the same kind of area with Barbados ranking near the top and Trinidad on the lower end. We also had Guyana in at 37, because I know we have some people from Guyana, and Suriname for 43. And again, when I was reading this stuff, I could actually see some historical. The problem with perception is it's tainted by your historical views. And my recent travels versus knowing my history of the region and also traveling around for 17 years, I kind of saw some historical data in there that maybe doesn't reflect the reality. But a couple of things just to point out. If we looked at it and we said, in there they broke out a few key things, which was quite good. And one of them they measured was absence of corruption. And just for this particular issue, the higher the number, the better you are, just so we're clear. So in Trinidad and Tobago, absence of corruption was surveyed to have a score factor of 0.50. In St. Lucia, it was 0.63. In St. Vincent in the Grenadines, it was 0.70, so very high. In fact, the highest. And Barbados was 0.68. And we had Grenada at 0.66. So a little bit of a cluster there. But if you remember, this is used to roll up into the index overall. So the only thing that's different is there's a big difference between Barbados and Grenada in the Corruption Perception Index. Barbados is at 68, and Grenada is at 52. But measured on this particular thing here, Barbados was at 0.68 and Grenada was at 0.66. So there was only a very small difference there, but yet when it rolls up into the bigger issue, it becomes something bigger. I don't know all the methodology that went into this, but that's just one little sliver. And then I've been to all these countries, and we have people from all over, and we might actually have a different view on the levels of corruption that might exist in each one of these jurisdictions that probably differs, actually, from what I just read across. I certainly know my opinion differs. So, anyways, another one I thought was kind of interesting was order and security, which rolls up into this whole thing. And just as another example, Grenada was 0.77. Barbados was 0.76. St. Vincent and the Grenadines was 0.74. And St. Lucia was 0.72. And Trinidad and Tobago was 0.66. Now, I don't know how that all rolls up into the thing, but I know, again, in my travels, and I just spoke with a pretty good source, so I'm going to trust it to be correct. The number, and I'm going to use this as an example of how I view order and security, is I know there was 2 murders in Grenada for the year so far. I know as of last week in Barbados there were 20. But yet the difference is a very, very minute difference. 0.77 for Grenada and 0.76 for Barbados. Yes?
Corruption Perception Index.
Yes.
Just a little clarification from, It's a perception, not a reality. So I want this clarified. Perception, not reality. Secondly, what is the significance? What is a perception, not reality? What is the significance? And thirdly, what are the factors for determining this index?
I think that's exactly the question. I don't know the answer. But I noticed exactly what you saw. Does perception divert from reality? Some of the more recent facts say it might. How much historical views of, Barbados versus Grenada or St. Lucia. I read another thing as I was doing this, and it was one of the travel blogs, and they were saying, in Grenada, you got to be careful about armed robberies that go on all over the place. And it was updated as of March the 9th. And I thought, well, I don't know that Grenada. This isn't where I live. So this is one of the problems when we're dealing with perception versus...
May I?
Yes, please.
In relation to the World Justice Report, Law and Order Index, from my own experience, the World Justice Project has made contact in Grenada with a number of professionals. Among them, well, I have been one of those persons who have been providing reports to the World Justice Project for about 2 or 3 years now. They send you I believe they vet and screen you before they make contact with you. I've done quite a lot of work in criminal law, and I've been around the region, as you would know. Worked with the DPP's office for a while, worked in Turks and Caicos, been a judge for a while. So I sort of assume that this perhaps were the reasons why they selected me. The questionnaire, again, it's a perception issue. What was my perception in relation to how police officers behaved, how judges behaved, whether they took bribes, whether people had to go to the station and offer something to get somebody out, and a lot of questions and standardized questions. They seem, in my own judgment, very finely tuned towards determining whether the justice sector, the police service, law enforcement, was operating at a corruption-free level from the perception of someone like me. And so if I could have been assured that all of the other persons were similarly placed like myself, the end result, I would think, would be, for me, reliable, at least from my own perception.
But I still want to make the point. In whose interest the perception of corruption or whatever it is should come from the stakeholder, in which here I'm talking about the people. The public's, what is the perception of the public in respect to this factor I'm talking about? Okay? So maybe, as you pointed out earlier on, maybe they have sampled professionals and institutions. But more than that, I want to know what is the variance from the perception and the reality. The data, as I mentioned earlier, the data is critical, or else we are giving false information.
I agree. I think also, and this is one of the questions I always had is, you know, as a former judge, you certainly have different perceptions versus maybe the lady in Grenville or the fisherman in Guelph. And they're all, you know, they might not all have the same experiences across a broad base, but their perception is also quite important. So just some stuff to kind of, and again, you can't tell. I couldn't tell anyways. And so just as the last, I'm just going to use one other example, and this is one I kind of know pretty good. Civil justice. Trinidad and Tobago was 0.58. Barbados was 0.65. St. Vincent was 0.61. St. Lucia 0.66. And Grenada was 0.62. So St. Lucia seems to be kind of leading the pack there, followed by Barbados. Now, I'm going to give you an interesting example. St. Lucia has a commercial court, and one of the first only civil commercial courts, I think, outside of BVI and the OACS, as far as I'm aware. More lawyers here than me. I'm in that commercial court all the time. It runs extremely efficiently. I can be in there sometimes, file a suit, and 3 months later, I'm done. You know, we do a lot of liquidations. That judge really keeps us on top of things. Extraordinary. When I'm in Barbados, I plan for 5 years of litigation before I'm going to get anything resolved. Difference is 0.1. Right? And that's not just my experience. I talk to a lot of lawyers, and they sit there and they go, if I'm going to do civil in Barbados, don't expect it to get resolved in the next year. So, you know, when we look across those kind of things, again, perception versus reality. And this is my reality. I don't know, somebody else's reality might be different. Sorry, sir.
Just to follow up on what Lady Anandi said, having heard from the representative from Transfer International last year, I think we're further unclear as to the indices. What the speaker mentioned was that in some countries, 3 markers are used, whereas in some, 10 markers are used. And I just comment on the example you just proffered, that the reason for delays in a court system may be mirrored, but doesn't mean that it's corruption-based. And if, in fact, an index or indice points to a shortcoming in the justice system as making a correlation to corruption, then that in itself would be faulty. And I think that's why we want either a better understanding or we would embrace what Lady Anandi and the Integrity Commission Grenada said, that we need probably our own Commonwealth CPI. And it's because I think there needs to be a better understanding of the process, because certain correlations are being made which are non sequiturs. And I think that is a concern, because I personally think that Jamaica is worse than it actually is being it's being labeled in the indice. I think it's worse, but it is because I think the process of gathering data, and I join with the Solicitor General, but on a different point. I was Contractor General for 5 years in Jamaica, and nobody ever spoke to me and asked me for data. And we were the main anti-corruption body in Jamaica, so who were they speaking to? Thank you.
I just want to share, and I thank you very much, Mr. Holocaust, for coming to really stimulate this discussion around the Transparency International Index. Because for our small states, we are very reactive to it. And Grenada came back on the radar of Transparency International just, I believe, in the last 3 years. Is it, Mr. Finley, roughly? Yes. So when we came back somewhat, I would say, at the middle of the pack, at the higher end of the world's spectrum, according to Transparency International. But still, we were called in to discuss it with a committee of social partners, some of who I believe may be represented here through the NGOs. No, okay. So the committee of social partners were concerned as to how Transparency International was arriving at their rankings. And I do recall we had also, from the Integrity Commission, reached out to you, and we had discussed about variances and so on, and all of that kind of methodology. And at first, it would seem to us that this committee of social partners here in Grenada were looking to the Integrity Commission to lay the responsibility of how we would be ranked in this anti-corruption index at our feet. So obviously we had to take it quite seriously. But as we began to investigate, we soon discovered that a lot of the data came actually from the World Bank and from this World Justice Project, which is also, it seems, some kind of ally of the World Bank. And the data that they were relying on, some of it was heavily economic, and some of it, as we heard, would have been around interviews with persons in the legal sector. But what bothered us, and why we asked specifically for a representative of Transparency International to come to our last conference, is that we had actually spoken with the head of Transparency International in Germany by a conference call originating right here from Grenada. And there was a third source of review. I can't remember the exact name, Mr. Finley, that third source, but it was a private organization, it would seem, private sector organization, and we were told that to get their information, we had to pay $800 US. After about 10 calls that yielded no results, and having offered to pay this money and again getting no results, we became alarmed as to what was really going on and why wasn't this Transparency International Index not transparent. Up to this day, we have not received any idea of what methodology this third source would have utilized to rank Grenada, and we became even more alarmed. We were given the assurance by the head of Transparency International that that source, because we had queried and because we were not accessing the information, would be withdrawn. However, when we saw the results of the 2018 ranking, again, that was a third source of information and or a review mechanism, and we realized that there really was, at least with respect to that source, no transparency about their methodology, and even as you have said, you remain unclear. They gave us their word, they did not keep their word, but I remember it was Mr. Pear from the FI who asked a very telling question, and we found out that this is a funded program, and it's funded by private sector interests that operate in the region. And that also raised a few flags. I don't know if to say a yellow flag or a red flag, Mrs. Walker, if you're here, in terms of compliance work. But it raised a flag to us, because listening to what you're sharing this morning about the rankings, and we're not very sure about the methodology, and that Barbados, which when they had their elections last year, the main platform that gave rise to regime change in Barbados was the plank of corruption. Yet Barbados, even after that kind of situation where their entire population said, we're very sorry, we're changing you government because we feel that government has become too corrupt for us, we want a new government, they are ranking yet repeatedly the highest in the region. So whose perception is it? And I can share it was not Grant Thornton, it was not PKF, but it was another one of those big accounting firms that was bankrolling the Transparency International with respect to this. That is when we became alarmed, because all of the time we of this region have been going along believing that this is some holy grail of an index. But when we found out by pressing and just asking questions about how do you get this done, what is your methodology, how do we arrive at these kinds of discrepancies or variances that you have pointed out, and perhaps who knows, it may have something to do with vested interest. I don't know, Mr. Payer, yes, I know he was there and he had a chance to question the person who had come from Germany to meet our inquiries. So, Superintendent.
Okay, so thank you very much and good morning. So I was very interested in the index process. In fact, whenever there's any measurement for corruption, it affects the image of the country, and it speaks to the system, whether or not you have organs or mechanisms to fight, prevent, and detect corruption and so on. So I approached the expert to try to find out what were the measurements that were used. I'm still unclear as to what exactly were used, and I had an additional interest to know who funded Transparency International, and that came up a bit blank as well, because my father liked to say, whoever pays the piper calls the tune, and so I was very interested in that. So I think how our response should be that we develop our own mechanism, our own measurement system, so that we will not be able to prevent the external measurements, but at least we would have one, not necessarily to counteract, but to show that we are doing something that can be measured by all and is regarded as fair. But the current situation is a little bit opaque as to exactly what is used, exactly what they measure. Because if it's a perception, it therefore means that the person who is assisting in the data really responds based on their own perception of it, and it cuts across, as you know, many different areas in terms of what fuels the thinking of the person. And so many times you get these questionnaires, you're never told that it's to measure corruption. It comes innocent, and you give answers, and then it turns out that it influences the index one way or the other. I think we also have to be careful when we come into contact with these questionnaires, that we ensure that we give informed responses, because sometimes I can tell you the responses can come from us unknowingly, and based on our response, we can influence and index one way or the other. I've had an experience when the CFATF did the mutual evaluation in 2008-2009, and when they spoke to the police official at the time, they spoke about how many of the officers who were being disciplined or who were on suspension. All right? They did not go into whether the matters were trivial or not. And what we found was that the examiners took these variables and draw the conclusion that the Royal Grenada Police Force was corrupt. And we fought for days on end to move that rating, and we couldn't win, because they said, look, the officials said that there were so many persons on suspension and persons who were charged internally for minor things like leaving the beat on duty. They never went into the particulars, but that influenced how we were rated. So sometimes we attempt to be, how we respond to these questionnaires is extremely important. We ought to not just respond as an isolated organization, but to share with the other stakeholders to get a sense of how really to respond. Because sometimes, these responses actually come from us, and we can't take it back when it's out there. Thank you.
Okay, I just have a quick comment regarding the perception index, because as the focal point for the Inter-American Convention Against Corruption and the UNCAC, we have a process, a mechanism, as the chairperson spoke to this morning. And so we're currently being reviewed in the second cycle. In the first cycle, we were reviewed by Antigua and Germany. And that's an open, transparent process. They send a questionnaire which we share with our stakeholders. I go to them, to get the information. We meet with civil society also. And then they come to Grenada to verify the information. And they meet with stakeholders, including the private sector, everyone. It's an open, transparent process. They verify the information. We have to provide the appropriate laws. We have to show how the convention is being implemented in Grenada. And in the first cycle, with respect to criminalization, for example, we have to show if there are convictions in certain regards for corruption. So we were able to show police officers that were charged. Of course, it wasn't many then. It was only about 2 instances where they were, and of course, not we call misdemeanors, but serious crimes. My issue with the Transparency International is that the process isn't very clear to me. And not necessarily because we may have placed in the middle or whether we placed it, but suppose we had placed at the top, and we don't know why we placed at the top. How do we remain at the top if we want to do better? If you get a perception, or we have a perception, and we're not clear as to the methodology of why we're there. So I think it is important to have these things clarified.
Mr. Holocaust, just excuse me one moment. I just was asked by the Attorney General to express his apology. Something very urgent came up, hence the reason he had to leave us. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, everybody. I think, I think we've outlined kind of some of the issues. The problem is, and we've kind of segued nicely into it, I think, what do we do? That really is, we've got this. It's somewhat opaque, for certain. I think we generally agree on that. And the problem is what to do about it. I've got, a few ideas in terms of that. Because perception is really minded by media nowadays. So one of the things I think, I don't necessarily think we should bury our problems, but I think we need to really put forward our successes. And I know one thing in working in the region very clearly is we really don't brag about our successes enough, at all. I mean, I've had the privilege of working with some really exceptional people, units, statutory bodies in the Caribbean that could hold their own against anybody, but we don't tell anybody. So I think the one thing we've got to do is we've got to brag about what we do a lot more, and brag about each other a lot more. So, because it's perception. I think the one thing that we do know is it doesn't appear to be reality, not from our own experiences that we see going on in our day-to-day lives. Other than that, I like the idea about coming up with your own index, everybody coming up with, our own index to deal with these kind of things. And I think calling people out. I think, one of my suggestions is to, maybe call out, the people putting together these indexes as a group and as a together with a voice, publicly, repeatedly, to say, we want to know. How is it put together? Just so at least we can, if it's correct and we agree with it, and even if we don't agree with it, that's fine. But at least knowing how it comes together so that you can defend yourself. Because there's nothing worse than, being accused and not being able to defend yourself. That's for the DPP. No, you can't. You got to do it. So I don't know if anybody else has got any ideas. I'd love to hear them. I'm sure everybody else would.
Thank you very much. Actually, I'm very passionate about CPI. I did a little presentation, or I prepared a little presentation on that, looking at the Caribbean scene landscape, and it was interesting. But I will say up front, I think we shouldn't be disheartened, because if I look at the methodology and the interpretation of the scores, and I look at where Grenada is 52, that means that corruption in Grenada is not very endemic. When I do my presentation, I'll touch a little bit on that so that I'll show you some of the methodologies to support what he has. Now, the interpretation of it is that any score that is below 50, corruption is endemic in that country by perception, not by reality. Of course, we all understand that perception is as important as reality. Because, for example, if I know that you are a murderer, you kill people, the way I'll deal with you, even though it's perception, because I haven't seen you killing, but I've heard that you can't kill anybody who cross your path. It's a perception. Our decision and our reaction or interaction with such a person will be different. So perception is as important as reality, as it is real, because it informs the way we view you. And that's why around the world, the media, the civil society, whatever you want to call them, community-based organizations, they always wait for the Transparency International Perception Index to use it to criticize their government based on the scores. Because even though it's perception, they think it's how the world sees our country. So in terms of the interpretation of the scores, as I mentioned, 0 to 50, corruption is endemic in your country. 50 to 100, you are dealing with corruption very well. Grenada is 52. Last year you were 52, this year you were 52. The day before, the year before, you were 56. So then, the question is that where were you dropping from 56 to 52, even when you are doing so well, when you have political will, when Commonwealth has come in to work with Integrity Commission to make things happen, and we could see that things are happening. So why are you still marking 52? Then I realized that it takes a while, because the data set they use, and I was going to show you again to support that, the data set they use sometimes is not very current, because if you look at research, anybody who knows research, who have done a little bit of research, your research is always backdated. The data you use is not current data. It's about 2 years, because it takes a long time to collect some global data. So the current data you have may be about 2 years back. So it will take you a lag time for it to reflect on your scores. So that doesn't mean that what you are doing, you should stop doing because it has not been acknowledged by the current scoring. What we mean is that going forward 2 years ahead, it will reflect, because then it will get into the data sets. I think we should be worried when we fall below, our marks fall below 50. Yes, any country should be worried when your marks, and about 3/4 of the world marks is below 50. 3/4 of the whole world countries, about 180 countries that the Transparency International uses, is below 3/4, below 50. Grenada, about 50. So at least there's even though we are worried, I think there's hope. So I'm looking at the brighter side of things. I don't look at the gloomy part of things. We still can criticize ourselves. We shouldn't rest on our oars, but I don't think we should also break our necks or kill ourselves or fall over because our effort is not manifesting immediately in the scores. Barbados, yes, for a long time, Barbados have been the best scores, one of the best scores in the region. The scandal that is happening there is not reflected yet, but I can promise you, if they continue to have those scandals, you see what will happen. Coming the next 2 years down the line, they will fall. Again, also, the ranking had nothing to do with your performance. Sometimes you are doing well because you are comparing with other countries. If I'm getting 52 And by the world ranking, I think I have to check if from 1 to 80, where Grenada is. I don't know whether you are in 43 or somewhere there. So it's not too bad. But if you get 52, you are in 43. And somebody will say 50, and it's, let's say, 46. And that country now does well. So you get 53. You to push your mark, your score down. Because he has now better than you, even though you are maintaining and doing the same thing you are doing. So there's a lot of, when you do the interpretation, there's a lot of things that goes into your rankings. For some time, it have no fault of yours. Some others are doing better than you, so it pushes you down. Sometimes you are doing better than others, so it pushes you up. But the most important thing that you should look at is your own score over 100. What you are doing, what you are getting. Are you over 50 or you are under 50? That raises concerns. Because as soon as you go below 50, then that means corruption is becoming endemic in your society. And you should raise the bells. So I think I wanted to support that point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, just following up on what Dr. Key has mentioned. And I remember at a certain meeting, we acknowledged that the perception lags a little behind. So when you do everything good, it takes a little while for people to acknowledge and for it to show it. So I do expect in the coming years, Grenada would look better than they are. I sincerely hope so. I also wanted to mention that as Barbados stands out higher than most of the Eastern Caribbean, we should also consider that Barbados is not measured by the same yardstick, because the three agents that we use, or Transparency International uses to measure us, the World Bank, CPIA, the World Justice Project, and Global Insight, they're not the same three for Barbados. I think Barbados uses either one or two of them, but it's not the same yardstick. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you. And I think that kind of really ties in nicely with our discussion about methodology and how it all comes together. And particularly when you're using surveys. The only thing I'm going to disagree with is that as a Grenadian, I'm looking for like 60s minimum. Now, I'm greedy. I'm sorry. I'm not going to even apologize for it. I see all the hard work going on, and I think we're not fully where we need to be, but we've come an awful long way. And I think what I see in a lot of the region is quite spectacular. So we'll look for those numbers to come up. We're, I think, getting into our coffee break. So I'm just going to, I was going to do a bit of a talk about enforcement and stuff, but that would put us well into the later part of the morning. So I'm just going to end off with one, I think, key point. We do a talk about a conference about bribery and impunity every year at the FIU, Florida International University in Florida. And one of the stats we always go through every year, and it's hard to get the right numbers, but is the amount of bribery that goes on in the world. And that's not the money lost, because there's losses over and above direct payments through shoddy work or having to pay too much. They estimate to be about $1 trillion. That's the UN. Big number globally. The amount of payments made in the US to resolve FCPA problems last 2018, was $2.89 billion. Now, they represent supposedly about 70% of all payments for resolving FCPA around the world, so let's just call it $4 billion. Now, this is payments to resolve bribery issues, not the actual recovery of the bribes or anything like that. So on that basis, that represents probably about a third to a fourth of a... So when we actually go to fight and we go to prosecute, we have to have the resources to bring to the table to fight. Because on the other side is $1 trillion. So it's something to think about. as we're dealing with this problem about the size of it and how monumental it is. So I know it's something we struggle with in trying to figure out solutions to, and it's good to see everybody at this table trying to deal with it. So thank you all very much. Really appreciate it.
And Dr. Holokoff has opened up our eyes as to some of the challenges we experience concerning the Corruption Perception Index that is put out by Transparency International. Of course, one of the main things coming out of it, I would say, is we have to keep on doing what we're doing and do it well. And I do believe that it will show up eventually, even though the system is not fairly balanced as we'd like it to be. At the moment, we do not have the control over that, but we just have to keep on working hard. So thank you, Dr. Holokoff. We have been very, Mr. Holokoff, we have been very enlightened in this discussion we had this morning. Thank you very much. So I just hand back to Ms. Sandy David, who would inform us of the next. I see a question coming up, so just before Ms. Sandy David come, we'd entertain that question.
So thank you, and thank you for the informative presentation. And I also want to zero in particularly on Dr. Koranteng's remarks. The issue of perception is important as reality. And in my view, I would not share the optimism if I think about, while we're making progress, what else seems to be falling apart, or certainly is happening that is going to influence that. But I know that is not it's not something we are going to discuss. But nonetheless, and certainly to some countries, they may not be dealing with it, but certainly to most of the OECS countries. I mean, as we might colloquially say, it's hitting the fan right now. And that is the elephant of the Citizenship by Investment program. And it is among the stones that I have thrown, but I will not provide any foundation material in this conference. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Mr. Finley, and perhaps we can just, in keeping with our presenter, Mr. David Holokoff and Mr. Finley for chairing, perhaps we could give them a big, big round of applause as we get ready for our coffee break, which is ready. And I know that most of you are waiting for letter writing, but we're going to do that a little bit later. Coffee is outside. 10 minutes, please. And if you find you're taking much longer.
I join my chairman and colleagues in welcoming you here again this morning. My name is Dawn Walker from the Integrity Commission, Compliance Officer. This session will cover the topic Global Trends in Anti-Corruption Deterrence and will run for approximately 1 hour. To share on this topic is our lead facilitator again, Dr. Roger Koranteng, and he's been with us over the last today's the 4th day. So today's sharing will be his final sharing with us in this training. Now he would have covered topics as public sector management system, a deterrent to corruption, parts 1 and 2. On the second day, conflict of interest management in keeping with international best practice. Yesterday, which was day 3, weaknesses in organizational governance. And most of us would have gotten a lot of takeaway points for it. You know, yesterday one was very interesting. All were very interesting, I should say. But one of the key things, the governance of companies is more important than the governance of countries. Quite interesting, yes? A lot for us to look at. And so he urged persons to apply fairness in good corporate governance to reduce or eradicate fraud and so. So before I invite our Dr. Karanta, as we call him at home now, Dr. K, to the podium, I'd just like to share for those of you that have his bio, but I'll just share a little on him, just a little. So Dr. Roger Karanta is the advisor and head public sector governance at the Commonwealth Secretariat. He is also the principal specialist responsible for governance and anti-corruption at the Commonwealth Secretariat, and therefore responsible for governance, anti-corruption in all the 53 Commonwealth countries in Africa, Caribbean, Pacific, and Asian regions. Dr. Key has over years promoted and championed anti-corruption in the Commonwealth member countries as well as non-Commonwealth member states. His anti-corruption works is recognized globally. And so Dr. Karantang is the proud winner of the 2018 Global International Anti-Corruption Excellence Award in innovation category. Now, this prestigious award recognizes persons annually who have not only demonstrated commitment into the prevention of corruption globally, but also their dedication to the Sustainable Development Agenda of the United Nations. Now, Dr. K holds a PhD in public policy from University of Birmingham, UK, an MA degree, public policy and administration from Institute of Social Studies, The Hague, Netherlands, postgraduate diploma in public administration, GIMPA, Ghana, and a postgraduate diploma in Environmental Studies, University of Oslo, Norway, and BA Honors, University of Ghana, Accra. He is married with children. And so our final sharing today from our Dr. K is, as I say, the topic will be delivered, and that is global trend in anti-corruption deterrence. So let us welcome our Dr. K to the podium for his final presentation in this series of training.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Married with children, yes. Married with twins. In fact, they are twins. I call them buy one, get one free. And most of the time, the free one is the most troublesome of them. The one, I didn't ask him to come. I wanted only one, and somebody decided to follow. And then he has never given me peace ever since he rudely entered my house. But I must say, it's a joy to see twins growing up. And sometimes you don't know who committed what crime. Who did it? It's not me, it's not me. Then you look here, are you the one? No. Are you the one? No. So you do like this, do like this. Then you said, okay, forget about it. Yes, I quickly want to start my presentation with where our brilliant presenter left off on the CPI, because I think I had some notes on that I wanted to share before I continue to do the deterrence bit of it. So basically, the Transparency International, as we know, is a non-governmental organization which is based in Berlin, Germany, and was founded in what year? 1993, correct. Now, its non-profit purpose is to take action to combat global corruption with civil society and anti-corruption measures and to prevent criminal activities arising from corruption. Now, it publishes its, for example, the Global Corruption Barometer, which is not very well spoken about, but the most spoken about is the CPI, the Corruption Perception Index. Because the barometer take care of is in-country one, it's specific to countries, and it doesn't compare to any country, but the Corruption Perception Index is where the ranking is. And that's where both those who are happy, because if you are doing well, they will hail it. Government will be so much happy because they are doing well by the ranking. And if you are not doing well, then you are angry, annoyed, and then civil societies will take you on because they will take it as an ammunition to criticize. So the Transparency International has the legal status of a German registered voluntary association and serve as an umbrella organization. Its members have grown from a few individuals who started ago about 8 to more than 100 national chapters which engage in fighting corruption in their home countries. Their mission is to create change towards a world free of corruption. Transparency International is a global civil society organization, as I've said, fighting against corruption. It brings people together in a powerful worldwide coalition to end the devastating impact of corruption on men, women, children around the world. It develops tools from fighting corruption and works with other civil society organizations, companies, and government to implement them. Now, since 1995, the Transparency International has issued an annual Corruption Perception Index, CPI, which is the most popular thing around the world. It publishes a global corruption report, a global corruption barometer, and a bribery payers index, which nobody is interested in, apart from the CPI. According to 2016 Global Go to Think Tank Index report, basically what he's saying is that the Transparency International is number 9 out of 100 top think tanks in the world. Their position is number 9. They are recognized. If we take the top 100 think tanks around the world, they are number 1. So they are well recognized. America has its own. They have 150 top think tanks, and they put TI as number 27 out of the 150. The organization defines corruption. In fact, I want to say this. I'm not worried why. I'm not surprised why American put them 27 instead of the first top 10, because they have they've expelled the USA TI from the TI chapters because of corruption. So that means that the Transparency International can take on even the biggest economy, the most powerful country in the world. And since Donald Trump got into the position, American ranking has been dropping because of corruption in US, because of one person. His corruption is affecting the whole country of US in that position. And they have also removed recognition of American Transparency chapter based on corruption. So they are no longer recognized. American Transparency chapter is no longer recognized as a credible organization that we should respect. The organization defines corruption as abuse of entrusted power for private gain, which eventually hurts everyone who depends on the integrity of people in position of authority. And I like the word entrusted. They didn't say abuse of your own bona fide power. They said abuse of entrusted power, because the power that the authority, the position you are holding is not yours. So don't use it as your private bona fide property to amass wealth for yourself. Period. It's not inheritance. It's entrusted to you, so you have to be accountable for it. Now, Transparency International is an organization that seeks to stop bribery and other forms of public corruption. Because Transparency International deals with public sector corruption. We should take it from there. Not private sector corruption, public sector. The CPI was launched in 1995. The CPI ranks countries and territories based on how corrupt their public sector is perceived to be. The public sector is perceived to be. A country's score can range from 0 to 100, with 0 indicating high levels of corruption and 100 indicating low levels of corruption. It is a composite index, a combination of polls drawing on corruption-related data collected by a variety of reputable institutions. So Transparency International doesn't collect any data on their own. It's an aggregation of data sets. Now, the reason why Grenada has only 3 is because reputable organizations who are collecting data that will fit the criteria to be used as a quality, authentic data are only 3 institutions. Some countries have more. I will discuss about that. Because if you have 3 and somebody have 5, and you use it, who will be disadvantaged? Is it the one who has 3 or the one who has 5? Because if you have 5, that means your scores, assuming the 5, you have such a bad scores in the 5, you have a very bad score. It will reflect on your bad score. If you have 3 and the 3 are good, you are better off. Unless, of course, all the 3 are bad or worse, then you are worse off. So in itself, having 3 may have its advantages and disadvantages, just as those who have 5 or more will have advantages and disadvantages. Sorry? Yes, we'll get there. Yeah, because you need to have certain, the criticisms will come. Yeah. I would not hold brief for Transparency International because they have a lot of criticisms. Just like any other human institutions will have criticisms. No matter what, you have criticisms. Once it's a human institution, like my Commonwealth Secretariat, who they have been asked whether Commonwealth Secretariat is relevant at all at some point, like how your organization will have criticisms whether you are doing well at all. So it's something that is going to happen. The CPI reflects the views of observers around the world. Criticisms. The Corruption Perception Index has received criticisms over the years. The main one stems from the difficulty in measuring corruption, which by definition happens behind the scenes. The Corruption Perception Index therefore needs to rely on third-party survey, which have been criticized as potentially unreliable. So the things we are talking about here is true. It has, over the years, have been criticized. Data can vary widely depending on the public perceptions of a country. The completeness of the survey and the methodology used have been criticized. The second issue is that data cannot be compared from year to year because Transparency International uses different methodology and samples every year. This makes it difficult to evaluate the results of new policies. The Perception Index authors reply, they have a reply, to these criticisms by reminding that the Corruption Perception Index is meant to measure just perception, not reality. But you remember my point. Reality is as good as perception. I mean, perception is as good as reality. Because you can't say perception is useless. No. We form our opinions and our interactions based on perceptions without even knowing the facts. So they argue that perception matters in their own right, since firms and individuals take actions based on perception. So, whether it's perception or reality, you have the same impact. Let's look at the methodology. The Corruption Perception Index has measured with what? I can't see it from here. Different methodologies from year to year, making yearly comparison difficult. But in 2012, the methodology was modified. Yeah. The methodology was modified in 2012 again, this time to allow the comparison across time. According to the Transparency International, the new methodology involves 4 basic steps, including the selection of the data source, rescaling the source data, aggregating the rescaled data, and a statistical measure indicating the level of certainty. A quality control mechanism is also incorporated into the process. This consists of independent data collection and calculation by 2 in-house researchers and 2 independent researchers from academia or from the universities. In 2017, the Transparency International used 13 sources as the basis for its country's scores. The sources included the African Development Bank for Africa, the World Bank for all of us, the Survey of Executive of the World Economic Forum for all of us, country risk rating from the Economics Intelligence Unit, and country risk rating from Global Insight, World Justice, among others. Sources must document their data collection methods and measurement approach, and Transparency International assesses the quality and adequacy of these methodologies. If data is collected via a business survey, for example, Transparency International will assess whether that survey sample size is large enough to be representative. So what does those scores, those numbers mean? Each year, according to the transparency, they score countries on how corrupt their public sector are seen to be. They say their corruption perception index sends a powerful message, and government have been forced to take notice and act. Now, behind these numbers is the daily reality of people living in these countries. The index cannot capture the individual's frustrations of this reality, but it does capture the informed views of analysts, business people, and experts in these countries around the world. The index, which ranks 180 countries and territories by their own perceived levels of public sector corruption, according to experts and business people, uses a scale of 0 to 100, where 0 is highly corrupt and 100 is very clean. Now look at Caribbean region. Those areas that have able to, because not all countries have been able to, in the region have been able to be, data have been collected from, because they don't have enough data in those countries, particularly the small countries, regions, islands, states, where data is not available. But if you look at the ranking, the countries, the regions, the 2018 scores, 2017 scores, 2016 scores, 2015, you see that Barbados, from 180 countries, they rank 25. Their score is 68 over 100, the current one. Last year, it was the same thing. 2017, it was the same. 2016, 61, so it means they've made a little progress. But the question was put, with all the corruption going on, that's why they changed government. Why is it that they are still at 68? They should wait and see the coming years and see whether they'll still be 68 if they don't change. Bahamas, 65, 65, 66. So they are falling by 1 point. St. Vincent and Grenadine, 58, 58, 60. Dominica. I didn't know that you are that better. 57, 57, 59. So you are going down a little bit. St. Lucia, 55, 55. From 60 to 55, no, you should do better than that. Because the gap is too, when people are losing only 1 point, you are losing 5. From 60 to 65, 55, the gap is too much. You should put your integrity commission in place properly and they start working immediately. Go and tell your prime minister. Grenada, my own, 56 to 52 to 52. Because it is my own, it will go to 54 next year. From the way they are going, they will go up. They will. Suriname, 45, 41, 43, they are going up. Trinidad and Tobago, 35. In fact, they are the most improved. From 35, they improved to 41. 6 points. And then they started marking time there, 41. They are 78 in terms of the ranking out of the 180 countries. Grenada is 53 out of the... Oh, but why didn't I see Jamaica? I missed Jamaica somewhere. What is your ranking? You are outlier. Okay. All right. So at least it gives you a picture where those are managed to capture briefly. But then more than 2/3 of countries scored below 50. That's the point I was making. On this year's CPI, with average scores of 43. So if more than 2/3 score below 50, 43 on the average, and Grenada is 52, why are you complaining? Or you want to compare yourself with the best, not those who are already on the floor? Yeah, I like that spirit. You should always have to aim high. But it reveals that the continued failure of most countries to significantly control corruption is contributing to a crisis in democracy around the world. While there are exceptions, the data shows that despite some progress, most countries are failing to make serious inroads against corruption. That's what it means. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's the bit I want to put in context with the CPI in addition to what the presenter made. But there's room for improvement, but I wouldn't throw myself under the bus because your score is 52, which is above 50, which means that though you have corruption, and of course every country has corruption, including the United States of America, they all have corruption. The most important thing is that, are you doing something about it to move further? That's the most important thing. You are above the line, the curve of 50. Below the curve means corruption is very endemic. Above 50 means corruption, you are doing something about corruption. My assessment is that Grenada is doing something about corruption, no matter how you want to criticize it. No matter how, we are all prone to criticisms. But the fact still remains that if you are using this perception, I will not put Grenada under the bus. 52. Of course, you have been to 53, I mean, you want to see 56 going to 60, as he's saying that from his analysis, you should be at 60. Yes, it's not beyond you. You could. All right, now let me go back to my next section. I'm sure there's no question about this presentation, about where Grenada is. No matter whatever criticisms you have, I've already mentioned them in my presentation. So don't open your mouth to criticize anything anymore. Because they themselves know all the criticisms about them. The most important thing is that, are we doing something about it? And if you ask me, I will say yes. Grenada is doing something about it. There's political will. The Integrity Commission is on track. Everything I've asked them, everything I've added, I've gathered them, everything I've said, they've taken it hook and sink and they have run with it. What else can I say? I can't say so many things about other countries. That's why this country is one of the countries in the region that I keep coming back. Because I think that it's like you have a child, the one who listens to you is the one that you always get attracted to. You see, the resources are very few. Commonwealth resources is dwindling. I don't think I would want to waste my time to go to countries who are not ready for anything. So that's the point. No international organizations will go to any country to waste their resources, human capital, and otherwise time. No, I will not do that. So I think we should hold our fire and rather support the fight against corruption. But that is the most important thing. Tearing ourselves apart, criticizing us, throwing ourselves under the bus for the bus to run over us will not solve the problem. Of course, it's important for us to say it as it is, like, okay, we need to do better. But I come from the academia. When you see a professor looking at your work, and we see a lecturer or a senior lecturer looking at your work, you see the difference. Somebody who is a professor with a long-standing experience, you have done a research piece, and he has to evaluate it. He will never, that professor, I haven't seen any professor with a gray hair who will put you down. He will look at it and said, even though you have done a bad work, the professor said, oh, Roger, you know what? I'm trying to understand what you're doing here. But don't you think that if you read this book or you add this thing here and you improve it much better? So let's do that. Then listen to what the senior lecturer and that lecturer with no experience who won't name for himself will say. What a useless piece you have written. What is this? You call this one a research piece? I can't see anything beneficial or anything researchable in this doc. He will just put you down. And then you start crying. No direction. No help. Put you under the bus and leave you. We shouldn't be like that. We should criticize, give direction. Say what you can do to help. Because that is what is important. Not to just criticize and leave. Again, corruption is not only one agency work. It has never happened, and it will not happen. Corruption is in education, is in health, is in environment, is in everywhere. So why do we limit to only one agency? That is your business to fight corruption. No. So that brings me to this silo mentality that we have. And in many Commonwealth countries, developing countries, oversight, governance institutions, as well as law enforcement agencies often operate in silos. They have turf wars. This is my area of operation. This is my area of operation. That's what we do. We have observed it. And that follow-ups and systematic coordination and cooperation of their effort are usually weak. Sometimes we lose the big picture. And I normally do this exercise. Integrity Commission or anti-corruption body, all those who are here, the law enforcement agents like police, the DPP, the Attorney General, the Public Service Commission, if I ask that question, you are doing all this work, what is your overarching objective you want to achieve? Immigration officer. What is it? What is the overarching? A lot of people lose the focus. The overarching is that we want to promote good governance in your country. Because good governance is all-embracing. If a policeman does his work well, if immigration does their work well, if the public administration does their work well, what are you doing for your country? You are promoting good governance in your country. So that is the overall objective. And that's why we need to work together, because we don't have a limited myopic objective of just catching criminals. And so what? If you catch criminals, what have you done? You are promoting good governance. If you get people to pay their taxes, promoting good governance. If you can provide justice, you are promoting good governance. The Prime Minister cannot do all this work. That's why he appointed, the state has appointed all of us to do pieces of this universal set called good governance. So we should have that in mind, and that's why we have to collaborate. Civil society have a better role to play in promoting good governance. The private sector, a bigger role to play in promoting good governance. So we should have that mentality. So mitigating against these challenges call for enhanced coordination and collaboration among oversight institutions to achieve a more effective anti-corruption fight. The Secretariat does not have an independent agenda. The Common Secretariat, what is our agenda? We don't have. What is our objective? We don't have. Or we try to impose a particular solution. No, we don't. Rather, our intervention is focused on providing high-quality technical assistance that help member countries to make their own decisions from an informed perspective on what is the best for that country or those countries, and then help them to implement their own priorities. So, for example, the Secretariat facilitates workshops for heads and chief executive officers, MDAs, ministry, department, and agencies, law enforcement agencies, governance oversight institutions in member countries to enable them to discuss and strategize the best way forward. We come to you, we say, what do you want to do? You invite us, you say, okay, we'll help you to do it. But we're not coming to impose on you what you should do, because every country is different. We are in different level of development. We have different level of assimilation or understanding. We have different level of even learning. Some countries learn very slowly. Some will start late, but they will run fast. Some will also run very fast, but they may not cross the finish line. They will run fast and then stand behind the finishing line. So, that is what we do. If our business is to fight corruption, then attitude towards corruption, I'm telling you, vary from country to country and from time to time. Attitude towards corruption varies from country and from time to time. So this presentation, I want to repeat it because I've done a bit of it, and I think I want to share with this time roundtable, because I think that encapsulates going forward and what we can do. There were times in countries when corruption was and is considered as almost natural, inevitable phenomena. In the past, corruption was not an issue. Nobody bothered about corruption. We accepted it as a way of life. I want some services, you pay some officer something so that you can get services on time and all that. We didn't bother. We thought it was normal. Now, it is assumed to have negative consequences for the economic growth and development, for service delivery, for equity, for democracy. It remains prevalent and seems to have even increased, as the CPI demonstrated to us. In the 90s, the attitude towards corruption became negative. In the 70s and 80s, it was okay. But coming in the 90s, it became a problem, perhaps because the impact of the so-called Washington Consensus and the fall of the Soviet Union. The Washington Consensus, that's when the IMF and all the World Bank and all those people came in because they were giving loans. And the loans were not being used for what it was meant to do. And therefore, they couldn't pay back. And then when they checked, why are you not paying back, they realized that the public officials pocketed those monies. Corruption. So because of corruption, that's why we are not paying our money back, forgetting that the World Bank is a bank. It's not a Father Christmas. So they want their money back. So if corruption is the one that's not allowing you to pay, then we should focus on corruption. That's why corruption came to light at the time. So corruption started to be called a menace. Because those who are giving us money realize that we are not paying because of this menace. To democracy and to market economy, suddenly there was less political tolerance for it and much more attention paid to corruption than in the earlier years. Why there was less political corruption tolerance? The less political tolerance was the fact that the World Bank, IMF, and all those, they were never going to give you any money if you are corrupt. And the political heads needed these monies, so they have to do something about it. And that's why they started forming, of course, the UNCAC came in, and UNCAC prescribed anti-corruption agencies to be set up to deal with that corruption. So governments started unwillingly to set up these agencies. Most of them were set up by government to fail, because the main idea is that they wanted to show to these international communities that we have these bodies, give us the money, because the money we want, you say we should do this as a condition. We have set it up. They were not setting it up to fight any corruption. Because as soon as you set these bodies, the government is in trouble. Because corruption, the main anti-corruption agencies, their target is the powerful in the system, in the society, not the poor. And who are the powerful and resource people in the system? They are those in government, and they are cronies in the business sector, leaders. So you are setting up an agency to come after you. Do you think they will accept it willingly, particularly if you are corrupt? So most anti-corruption agencies were not performing. Of course, as I've said, the role of Western government, the World Bank, IMF, and other international institutions in denouncing corruption and code of conduct became common. But then, after a while, the civil society and the media and the people themselves realized that those institutions are important to ensure our development as a nation. So they started putting pressure on government. And later on, some of the government themselves, officials, those who became president and prime minister themselves, came from that school. So some of them, when they get into position of authority, they started now looking at these institutions to make them work because they believe in those institutions. If you come, some president, prime ministers, others, they didn't believe in those institutions, so they will let them to fail. So if you have the curse as a nation of your ancestors, and you elect a president, a prime minister, or whoever who doesn't care about corruption, then the country is doomed because your ancestors have cursed you. You should have people who believe in corruption fight. Then you can go forward. So in the 80s, 70s, 80s, much was not spoken about by development institutions because they think corruption were too sensitive at the time. You were going to give loans to countries and you want them to, because you were a bank, you want them to collect money. So they give monies to all kinds of people. In Africa, Mobutu Sese Sekus, and all the very, very corrupt people were given millions, and this corrupt government didn't know what to do with this money. Some of them creating monarch thrones for themselves with a whole Mobutu, or one of them, Bokassa. Bokassa used that money. He carved a golden throne. You are just a president. You have no royal blood inside your body, but you have created a monarch throne made of pure gold, and you are sitting inside, and your people were swallowing in poverty. That's what they were using the money for. Mobutu Sese Seko was using the loan that he has collected to sponsor university students in Switzerland who wanted money to go to beach, to go and make party and drink and make merry at the beach. That's what he was giving money to, so that they will know that he's very rich. Meanwhile, his country, poverty. So they realized that, no, we have to do something about corruption. So during the 1990s, the government of several important countries, Italy, Japan, Brazil, and others, fell because of corruption. We're talking about developing countries that they are being corrupt. But the developed countries, look at them. Japan, Brazil, they're also very corrupt. And then when the awareness was created, the citizens started voting them out of office based on corruption. And I keep saying that this today, if most countries, most politicians will win elections only when you want to tackle corruption. In your region, a test case is Barbados. So corruption was always cited as a reason for military coups in the 70s and 80s. Some government and international institutions like World Bank started to react to corruption in the 1990s onwards because they wanted their money back. They wanted the loans. Not that they wanted, they will love Africa, Caribbean, Asia so much that they will fight corruption. No. They are fighting of the corruption that they were interested in because they wanted their loans that they have taken back. So that's why they were interested in corruption. Otherwise, they were not going to be bothered. Like now, China is not interested in corruption, so he's not going to talk about corruption. They will give you all the money, the loans, and all that. They are not bothered. So what China is doing now, the Western countries have done it in the past, until they themselves get to the realization that they have to talk about corruption as a conditionality to get their monies back. So the whole world came together through UN and put the UN Convention Against Corruption, the UNCAC, which was drawn from earlier effort. The convention was adopted by the UN General Assembly in December 2015. And to date, about 178 countries have. I'm not going to go through this type of, we all know grand corruption, which is a very, very big one, systemic one, and petty corruptions and all that. I'm not sure I want to bother you with all this. We know the types: bribery, fraud, embezzlement, extortion, bureaucratic corruption, where you bend the rules and then you get all the kickbacks and all that. But what I'm interested in is this one. How do we go forward in terms of the strategies? First and foremost, one of the things we have to do, before I forget, is we have to make sure that we domesticate all these international conventions into our laws. It's very important. You have to domesticate all the conventions you have signed up to, because that will go a long way to affect your rankings in the Transparency International. The rankings, if you have not domesticated, the fact that you sign it up doesn't mean that you put it into effect. Countries have to, and I'm happy the AG is here, the DPP is here, all the powers that be, and the parliament, you have to make sure it doesn't cost you anything. But once you domesticate it, it sends the right signals to the international community that you meant business. So we have two types of strategies around the world to fight corruption. We have what they call the deterrent or enforcement. They are the same. Deterrent or enforcement are the same. And these are your legislation, investigation, prosecution. That's the deterrent or enforcement. Then we have the preventive, which is prevention. On the other hand, the whole world has focused on this one, deterrent or the enforcement. So an important point is that enforcement, strict laws and vigorous prosecution come into play when abuse of public funds or violations of the rules have already been committed. And then you go after them, you investigate and you prosecute them. But it takes so long, so much resources to do this. However, as I'm saying, and I said before, some countries, that's the only thing they do. The enforcement or the deterrent is the only thing they are interested in. Because I asked the man in Singapore, Mr. Chua, why don't you do preventive? He said, what is preventive? Preventive. Here we don't bother about prevention. Our prevention is the deterrent. When you take you to prison and you have been punished so severely, that in itself is public education. So, but you see, the conditions in Singapore, you cannot replicate it. They are highly authoritarian government. Their freedoms of even association, demonstrations are all curtailed. You cannot just get up and go and do demonstration in Singapore. You dare not. They'll change your sleeping place within 24 hours. So you cannot bring it to a democratic country like Grenada to say deterrent is the only way out. So for them, the Singapore Anti-Corruption Bureau, they say you are better off if you sin against God than to sin against the Anti-Corruption Bureau of Singapore. Because for them, kill the chicken and scare the monkeys. If you sin, you go on your knees, you pray and you repent, good God will forgive you. And he tell you go and sin no more. If you are corrupt and Singapore authorities get you, you can pray and fast for 100 days, not the 40 days. You still go into it. They will not change their mind. So don't. However, we are saying that focusing solely on the enforcement strategy could be an expensive option, and hence emphasis should be given to prevention. As we all know that corruption, when you are fighting the big guys with all the resources, they fight back. They will fight you back. And sometimes, or most of the time, they win over you. So we have to be innovative as to how to even prevent that from happening at all in the first instance. So the preventive strategy is the way to go. But the preventive strategy also, it takes a long time to show results. The media is not interested in those things because they cannot sell their paper by publishing your preventive strategies. They would like to sell their paper by your deterrent, those big fishes you have arrested and investigating and all that, and the scandals. That's what they want. They don't come and say you are able to do some risk analysis of an institution and you are doing well. So no, it's no news for them. So the public will not know. But that is where the future and the sustainability of your corruption fight should lie. So preventive strategy needs to instill behavior change that transform values and ethical framework through awareness and sensitization. Through awareness and sensitization and changing values. It takes a long time. But what we have to do is that you have to mainstreaming public service professionalism and ethics should be an integral part of the bureaucratic reforms aimed at building a culture of integrity and preventing corruption. However, we should note that transformation of values and public ethics requires a long time, as fixing or reversing the deterioration of a value system in a society. It takes a long time. But anything that takes a long time, when it gets hold, it's forever. Anything that is fast, it also fades very fast. It's as simple as that. So you need to work on that. And when it takes hold, then it's sustainable. So external approach to corruption mitigation or anti-corruption effort mainly involve the following action. So the external one, which has to do with the deterrent and enforcement, first you create anti-corruption agencies, like integrity committees. It's external one. And that is also on the UNCAC recommendation. State parties should create those institutions. Adoption and enforcement of a strong anti-corruption laws. Creation of an office of ethics in government, or sometimes in the Prime Minister's office and others. These are all external things. It doesn't affect the person's behavior in terms of values. They are all external that you are looking out. But the internal one is based on the values and the systems. Internal approaches to corruption mitigation, on the other hand, involves strengthening internal administration, processes in public agencies, and minimizing human interface with the help of ICT. Yes, sir. Yeah. Come again. Sensitization, yes, it is. Sensitization is prevention, because you are educating for people to see. It's not external. It's internal. External is the laws, the creation of the agencies, the enforcement, but anything that appeals to the human being to look at this issue of corruption and have an intelligent view of it, that it hurts you and the community is within. So that is sensitization. You are building values. You are sensitizing people, you are educating people, you are creating the awareness for them to understand that it is wrong to be corrupt. And I'm saying that if you go to countries, if you look at the Transparency International ranking, look at all the top 10 and see what they are doing. Apart from few others like Singapore, the Scandinavian, the New Zealand, all of them, they go preventing way. And forever they're going to be there because the system has been built. The education has been done, the inculcation has been made so much that the young, the middle, and the old all understand that corruption is bad. So the main reason for lack of success in anti-corruption mitigation effort globally can be summarized as this. One, emphasis in fighting corruption has been on punitive and deterrent aspect of corruption. And not enough emphasis has been on the preemptive or the preventive approaches to corruption. And two, corruption mitigation approaches in general have not been applied on sustainable basis. It's touch and go in most developing countries. Internal approach to corruption mitigation consists of the following. First, you have to look at it yourself inside. Those public sector organizations have to understand that the whole thing have to start from home. We say, heal thyself, doctor. And recognize that corruption represents management failure. Any organization that there's corruption there, management has failed, period. It's not the Integrity Commission that has failed. It's the management of that institution, whether it's the ministry, the department, or agency, or private sector, or NGO, or even civil society. The private sector, you have failed. Because corruption under your nose. That's what it means. So before government can fight corruption in other places, it must put its own house in order. Those who live in glass houses cannot afford to throw stones at others, and they say charity begins at home. Hence, the starting point for effective corruption mitigation must be at the core of government. And having corruption mitigation or anti-corruption effort at the core of government means there must be political will. And therefore, political will is so important. Normally, when you talk about political will, yes, the backstop with the head, the prime minister, yes, but also the ministers. Because the prime minister has so many things to worry about. So he appointed people to promote good governance. And they themselves must have political will. Now, one of the things I've also seen in most of the institutional heads is that sometimes we are too quick to please our presidents and people in high authority, prime ministers. Why? Because I have to do maybe not the right thing, because I assume that my boss will not like it. No. Sometimes we assume for our heads, we assume for our prime minister, we assume for our president, we assume for our ministers. So you get senior civil servant doing wrong things, unethical things, because our ministers and bosses will not like if we do the right thing. We want to please them. So sometimes we become corrupt for them when they have not asked us to be corrupt. Systemic and widespread corruption in most agencies generally exists with the knowledge of our senior management. But they don't do anything about it. A good manager familiar with all the nooks and crannies of his or her department will or should know the areas of operation with high risk of potential corruption. They know if you have been in that organization for a while. You should know where all the vulnerabilities are. Why are you not doing anything about it? Are you waiting for anti-corruption agency like the Integrity Commission to come and do it, which they don't know until the case come up? And not all the cases that will come to their attention. So often, the widespread corruption in government agencies exists with active knowledge and collusion of the departmental heads, or with his active conscience or neglect. The latter happen because the cost of intervention is not worth the benefit to the individual. Because this tendency is facilitated by the short tenures of senior administrators. After all, I'm going to be here for a few years. Why should I go and fight corruption? What am I going to get? Is the money coming to me? No, but after all, I'm not going to be here. So the people go there, they see the thing, they keep quiet because they know very soon they'll move on. It's not right. So corruption mitigation strategy needs to be projectized or implemented with a clear action plan with goals, objective criteria, success indicators, targets, because what gets measured indeed gets implemented. However, this action plan for corruption mitigation cannot be a standalone action plan. It needs to be part and parcel of the overall performance management plan. In other words, if the head or the PS does not implement corruption mitigation action plan, it will have an adverse impact on their performance or appraisal or scores. And that's what others have done. So I want to move quickly to finish this. What is being proposed here is that there are clear steps that you can do to mainstream anti-corruption in your country. The first one is that all departmental heads, all PSs and other heads who are responsible for everything and anything that happens under their watch should be responsible for eliminating corruption in their organizations. Because they know it. First step, they should identify potential areas of their department operations that may be at risk of having potential for corruption. So first, you sit down, you look at your operations, your department, everything, say, these areas are the places I think corruption is happening or can happen. The second step is that then you prioritize. Which are the most areas, the areas I should tackle first? Or I should put the satellite on? Or I should let them be aware? Third step, recommend possible strategies, that's policy, program, project, activities, to mitigate this potential risk for corruption. It's not so difficult to do. This is not so difficult to do. Then, step 4, convert this strategy into action plan. Annual action plan with a clear, specific actions, priorities, success indicators, and targets. You task people who are responsible to show what they have done in terms of the action plan. Step 5, integrate this action or the corruption mitigated action plan into departmental performance management plan. That you're going to, it will be part of the appraisal system. That what action, what have you done? What have you been able to outline all the potential areas? Have you prioritized them? And what actions have you taken? It will be part of your, so people have to answer from the bottom to the top. Step 3, incentivize the departmental staff for contributing to this process of identifying this risk for potential corruption and giving ideas for plugging the loopholes and other mitigations strategy. The point is that if you don't put any accountability mechanism, nobody will do it. The way they will do it is that it will be part of their appraisal system. Then everybody will sit up. It will be part of their promotion. Everybody will sit up. But if they don't get anything by doing this, nobody will do it. So, in conclusion, because much as you want to go on, the room also is becoming very warm for me, so it tells me that I should wrap up and get off here. The air conditioning is terrible. So, the above 6-step approach to mitigating corruption is predicated on the fact that prevention is better than cure. Because when the corruption happens, we have already lost it. The resources have been lost. It takes resources to fight back and go and retrieve it. So why don't we stop it from happening if we can do these simple steps? So this action makes use of insight and knowledge of internal employees who are comparative advantage in identifying the risk and suggesting appropriate remedies. They are there, they know the work, they know the loopholes, they can suggest how to deal with it. Yes. So given that this exercise is internal and there's no significant cost associated with it, there's a good chance it can be sustainable and continuous ongoing exercise. Once this corruption mitigating culture, or we call it the ecosystem, has been created, the need for external interventions should decrease over time. Like how the Scandinavians, the Singaporeans, the Hong Kongs, the New Zealanders, Australians have done. Because it's part of the public administrative system. Every head of ministry, department, and agency, you are the chief anti-corruption officer in your jurisdiction. take care of your responsibility, and the anti-corruption agency or the integrity commission will give an oversight. And they go after the core ones. When the issues have come to a point where the corruption has happened, then they come in. But for the preventive, you should do it in your ministries, your department, or your agencies. And if you can have that cultivated in our system, and there's a political will, and we set a clause that each principal secretary should have a clause in your performance appraisal how you have done prevention measures in your ministry, department, and agency, that will be a turnaround. Because there's accountability in there, that you're going to answer to what you have done. If you think there's no corruption, they say there's no corruption, so we have not done anything. But at least we have put the process in place. But woe betide you if the corruption happens, and you have lied to the office of the Prime Minister or the DPA or whoever is in charge, that you said there was no corruption, you have put the system in place, and now corruption is happening. So how do you answer for that? We should be able to organize ourselves. I think I will end here, and if there's any few questions or comments, we will take it, because it's supposed to be a roundtable discussion before we break it up. Is there any question, comment? Is it something that we could do? Because it's very simple. All that we have to make sure that we commit ourselves, and there's accountability to do it, and somebody will ask and check, period. That's once that can be done. And in some cases, what they do is that all these plans, your action plan or what you're going to do, you give it to the integrity committee to look at it and see whether it's okay before it goes to the office of the Prime Minister.
Okay. All right, so thank you, Dr. Koranteng, for such an informative presentation. I like your recommendations. Just a question on the recommendation that you can implement within the institutions. In terms of the reporting aspect of it, how frequent should that be?
It should be quarterly. Yes, it should be quarterly. Because, you, the head, you are not the one going to do it. You're going to get your officers in various units under you to give you the report. So all that you're going to do is to collate the report and send it appropriately to the Integrity Commission, and also that report annually will be sent to the office of the Prime Minister or the appropriate agency. So that's what it is. But then, because you are responsible, you make sure that in your jurisdiction, the agency, the department, everybody is on top of that. And you realize that you reduce corruption drastically over time, because at least there's somebody there who is going to take an action, not an external person coming to do this. Yes, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Dr. Koranteng, and I know that you are literally embedding and leaving this message of taking a strategic approach to anti-corruption, not only for Grenada, but for all of the other territories, countries that are represented here at this expanded roundtable today. I just want to share that this presentation is particularly timely because the UNODC, which is the mechanism for the implementation of the UNCAC, has been in contact with us at the Integrity Commission, because it was last year, and we were supposed to have continued in July, I believe, that we were together, especially all of these stakeholders gathered here under the roundtable mechanism, we were supposed to adopt a national strategy as is required to implement the UNCAC. However, there was a change of personnel, and we are now being requested to complete that exercise in July of this year. Along with that, of course, goes proposed legislative changes to really give meaning to this implementation process. And I'm very happy that
The DPP is here because he has a major role to play. I don't even think that when these laws were being drafted, he realized that he may have to expand his office, because he's now being tasked under the Prevention of Corruption Act and also in terms of the Integrity in Public Life Act, with responsibility for being, in effect, the Investigator General. And as a result of that, we have had to consult with him from time to time from the Integrity Commission. The Attorney General's office, of course, will also have to take a lead in terms of doing those required amendments. So even though we here in Grenada have some proposed amendments to be made to the acts, we have been waiting for the completion of that process so that we can have a holistic review and amendment legislative agenda. So I just want to thank you very much on behalf of the Integrity Commission, and I'm sure that Mr. Branch here is really able to piggyback on this mechanism, and we've offered really to collaborate with him and to assist in making sure that this strategy, an anti-corruption strategy for Grenada, becomes a reality. And thank you for these insights and input.
Thank you, Chair. In fact, that is very good, because I just wanted to find out at what stage are you on the national integrity strategy or anti-corruption strategy, because countries over the years that have helped them to implement the strategy, it's one thing having the strategy and one thing having the implementation. However, I could see Grenada, you already started with this roundtable, you have identified all the key stakeholders, because in the past, what we have done is that we now have to go and identify the key stakeholders to sensitize them before we implement the strategy. So the strategy document, we're going to have functional roles for each ministry. Because if you have national anti-corruption strategy, you're going to have something that some committees have to be formed for the implementation. The education committee, Minister of Education should be there. There will be the office of the DPP and the legal side. There's so many segments. And then you're going to have overarching steering committee of all the implementation committees to report to the steering committee to look at the overall picture and see how far we are going with it. So it's very systematic way of doing that. And I think I can promise you that when you get to that level, when you have your document and you are ready to do the implementation, the Commonwealth Secretariat will be there to assist, because you have done that over the years in countries. And one of the key components for the implementation of the National Anti-Corruption Strategy is that the office of the Prime Minister should be very key. And I know that he has the political will already, because he's the person that can ship everybody into line and get accountability. And of course, with the DPP, the Attorney General on board, you are almost there. So let's see the UNODC, who are the custodians of the UNCAC. They'll help you to put the document in place, and then when it gets to the implementation, we'll help you and the UNODC to do that, because we have helped countries around to do the implementation. I would like to thank you. This is my last presentation. I'll leave the shores tomorrow, so I may not be here in the evening, but I will come back on Monday before I go back to England. So thank you for having me. I wish you all the best. It has been just like before. I've enjoyed my stay coming to my second home, and I hope I'll come back again very soon. Thank you, and have a good lunch. Somebody wanted to ask a question. I didn't see that person. I think you wanted to ask a question. The one in the position. So
Mr. Branch.
maybe I didn't see the light was on me, so sorry.
Okay, thank you for a great presentation, Dr. Corrington. I was very interested in this presentation, because the question of how do we go forward to really fight corruption, how do we work together, not in silos, but as a team, is of particular importance to me. I've been part of several reviews of Grenada, both under the UNCAC and the Inter-American Convention Against Corruption. And the issue is that after all these reports, what do we do? How do we come together to implement the recommendations? So that is important, and also your offer of assistance in working on the strategy, implementing the strategy once we have that final document. So I look forward to, together with the Integrity Commission, collaborating on that issue. I just want to mention briefly in passing the comment you made regarding China, is that from my perspective, I think that even China is changing their attitudes towards how they engage with us in terms of corruption, because they've been aggressively collaborating with the Commonwealth Caribbean, and in Grenada in particular, in implementing issues regarding international cooperation at Article 4 of the Convention and Article 3, because they've recently signed and we've recently implemented extradition treaty with China and EMLA treaty with them. And in September last year, Grenada was host to a regional meeting on anti-corruption, focusing on extradition and mutual legal assistance. We had the foreign ministers of most of the, well, of quite a few Caribbean countries in Grenada, not only countries with that they have diplomatic relations with, some other countries too that were allied with Taiwan who are in Grenada. So I've seen a change in the attitude, and they're looking to have more direct engagement. Of course, it's because of the increasing strengthening of economic ties and the interest in the Caribbean.
Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, the final presentation that was sharing, that was delivered by Dr. Roger Caranthan. And so it was delivered with, as I say, it's comprehensive, as usual, very thought-provoking, and delivered with passion. Lots to take away. We had a lot of stats, and so we know each country will be working to improve their scores on the CPI. So all have a role to play in promoting good governance. Okay, and I'll now like to invite the operation manager, Mrs. Henry Greenage, to come to the podium to do the other segment. So, Dr. Roger Caranthan, thank you again for your presentation, and to you, the participants, for engaging and having an active session. We know we are a little bit on time, but we'll be wrapping up very soon. I know we are running a little late for lunch, but we're closer to the lunch time.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Walker. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think we can all say that these past 4 days have been a resounding success. Can I hear? So, gives us a lot of food for thought. And I am very pleased, as I'm sure Lady Chairman is also pleased with the success of this activity. And I know that we will go forth to ensure that more leadership programs are shared with you, our participants. Before we go any further, we want to invite the chairman of the Integrity Commission of Guyana, Mr. Kumar Durasamy, I wanted to get the pronunciation quite right, who just wants to express on behalf of the participants his own sharing of what transpired here. So, Chairman?
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, first I would like to thank Madam Ananda Joseph. I remember last year when we met in the Turks and Caicos Island, our team spoke to her about getting some training in respect of getting our commission going, and she promised us that she will try. And we find today we're reaping the benefit from whatever she would have done, and we're very happy for that. We don't have a long history in this Integrity Commission in Guyana. It's unfortunate that the commission was formed since 1997, but only last year the commission actually was put into action. Apparently, for those years, there was no political will. And we find that within the past 3 years, the government of the day, apparently, they have the political will. They got a review of the Integrity Commission Act, and some recommendations were made. And then they had a review of the Code of Conduct. We now have a new Code of Conduct. And we were able recently to hire some staff to rent a building, to get security, and to hire a legal and compliance officer. We're now hoping after this session that we will hire some investigative officers. So when this organization reaches the Turks and Caicos Islands 2 months down the line, we will have something to the Cayman Islands, sorry. We will have something to report to my friend here, Mr. Dork Harrison, as to how we are progressing. I'm very grateful for the topics that were actually brought in this conference here. Dr. Carrington, it was very, very interesting. We're hoping to get some documents from you as to whatever was presented. And we're hoping to meet this afternoon again with the Integrity Commission to look into some other aspects of matters that interest us. And overall, I must say how thankful at least our delegation for Guyana is, because we were like just coming out of the cocoon, and we're now seeing the light. And I'm hoping that we'll benefit tremendously from whatever we experienced here for this past few days. So once again, I would like to thank the Grenadian Integrity Commission for bringing us here, and I would like to thank Dr. and also the other presenters, because we were able to benefit from whatever they had to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite our overseas guests to stand. And I'd like you to join me in giving them a lusty round of applause. Thank you for being here and sharing these past 4 days with us. And based on what Chairman said, I know that you have learned a significant amount. We look forward to interacting with you and sharing with you as you continue to make your integrity commissions fully functional. And just to say for the benefit of the media, that we had representatives from Guyana. We had 3 representatives from Guyana, the chairman, commissioner, and secretary to the Integrity Commission. We had a representation from St. Lucia, representation from Dominica, and representation from Mocha, from Jamaica. So welcome again, and thank you for being here. As we continue, we would like to issue certificates of participation so that you can show persons that you were part of this leadership training. I would therefore like to invite our administrative assistant to help with the certificates. And first of all, I'd like to invite I would like to invite Dr. Coren Teng, our senior facilitator, to distribute.
Oh, I thought I was going to get it.
You will get something towards the end. Yeah.
I'm just kidding. Okay.
So first of all, we'd like to invite Mr. Elvis Morain. And we'd like our DPP to get ready. Mr. Christopher Nelson. Mr. Shane Derby of Customs. And from the audit department, Mrs. Bolanli Oshikanlu. I don't like to mispronounce persons' names. To be followed by Mr. John Mitchell, Commissioner of Prisons. We'd like to invite the chairman of the Integrity Commission of Guyana, Mr. Kumar Durisamy. Mr. John J. Charles, Assistant Commissioner of Police. Ms. Naomi Jeremiah, could you get ready, please? You're next. Of the Public Service Commission. Mr. John Alexander of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Ronnie Marichaud, Ombudsman Office. Thank you very much, Dr. Kay. It's my pleasure to invite Mr. Dirk Harrison to assist us. We'd like to invite from the contingent from Guyana, Ms. Amanda Jaisi. To be followed by Mrs. Rosemary Benjamin Noble, Commissioner. Mr. John Reed, you can get ready to join us up front. Rohan, sorry. Rohan Reed. And Mrs. Palestrina Roll George and Ms. Jean Morel, you can stand by. And she's from Dominica. And we have Jean Morel from the Integrity Commission, St. Lucia. And finally, for Mr. Harrison, we'd like to invite Mr. Timon Charles, the Department of Statistics. Thank you very much, Mr. Harrison, Chairman. Lady Joseph. Ms. Sandra Ferguson.
Want to say to Sandra, thank you for the foundation blocks.
Alison Ordain Miller from the Ombudsman Office. Oh, and Ms. Ferguson represented the interagency grouping. Superintendent Pear.
Just want to say thank you very much to this stakeholder as well, from the Ombudsman Office, the Ombudsman, or Ombudswoman herself.
Superintendent Tafawa Pear of the FIU.
It is really my pleasure to congratulate the FIU, headed by Superintendent Pear, a very close ally in this anti-corruption sector for the Integrity and Prevention of Corruption Commission.
We'd like to invite Mr. Robert Branch.
One thing for sure, we always know the Integrity Commission. Mr. Branch will call us for assistance. Mr. Branch, thank you for being with us.
And in their absence, they were here with us before, but had to leave, our AG Dashan Ramdani, as well as Mr. Joseph K. Roberts, who had to leave. He was not feeling well. Ms. Ferguson, please extend to him our best wishes that he recovers soon. I don't know if you'd like to collect for him.
Once again, civil society, thank you very much for keeping us on our toes, our P's and our Q's. Not our eyes are trying to cross our T's.
Okay. Chair, don't leave yet. At the Integrity Commission, we are not a wealthy organization, but we still do like to say thanks to persons who assist us from time to time. And I think it's only fitting that we show our appreciation to our presenters who helped to make this training program the success that it was. And we'll ask Lady Trotman Joseph, our chairman, to distribute these tokens. And I would like to first of all invite Dr. Roger Corenteng to come forward.
Well, I will speak aloud. Dr. Corenteng, there's no secrets at the Integrity Commission except as mandated by law. We are transparent otherwise. Dr. Corenteng, it is no secret from among us participants how much we appreciate you and how much we welcome you to Grenada each time you come. But more than anything else, we learn when you come. And I thank you, and I make this simple token of presentation.
Thank you so very much. And thank you all. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
And Dr. K, we'll also ask you, please, on your return to the UK, to express our sincere appreciation to the Commonwealth Secretariat.
Thank you.
And Baroness Scotland, by extension.
I think the media should cover that one. We want to see that one. The appreciation to the Secretary General. So they get more money.
We'd like to invite next Mr. Dirk Harrison.
I just want to say, Chairman Harrison, that you have taken the baton and you really have run with it. I wouldn't say with it, with it. And we thank you so much for all of the technical cooperation on behalf of our regional CCA and CAB that you have been extending to Grenada as well as by extension all of us who have come in from other jurisdictions. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
And Superintendent Pierre, we'll ask you please to collect on behalf of Mr. Lockerbie, who presented yesterday. Tuesday, on Tuesday.
Just to share, these are mugs. No one has shown the transparency of it yet, but these are mugs, and when hot water is added to it to make your coffee or tea or whatever, it changes color, it comes clear. So again, we're talking about transparency.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chairman. To end this session, just before we invite you to share in lunch with us, I just want to leave these thoughts with you. I don't know how many of you in the room ever read the book To Kill a Mockingbird. It was a book that I studied for literature when I was at secondary school. And it's a book that I thought, and still do think, have quite a lot of lessons to be learned. And I just want to share this one. Scott, that's the little girl in the book, asked her father why he was defending Tom Robinson when everyone thought that Tom was guilty. Her father responded to her, they're certainly entitled to think that. And they're entitled to full respect for their opinions. But before I can live with other folks, I have got to live with myself. The one thing that doesn't abide by majority rule is a person's conscience. Atticus, therefore, has displayed integrity by deciding to follow his conscience in the face of adversity. He made the noble, morally right choice to defend Tom Robinson despite the negative reaction he receives from the Maycomb community. And finally, another bit that I picked up somewhere, I can't remember exactly where, but it says that take some time to reflect on your actions. Choose to always do the right thing. And remember that change starts with you. The greatness of a man is not in how much wealth he acquires, but in his integrity and his ability to affect those around him positively. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you all for participating in our leadership program. I wish each of you a pleasant weekend, because I won't see some of you tomorrow. I wish you Godspeed as you make your way to your various destinations. And finally, I invite you to do a group photo. Please remember to fill the evaluation forms, because it is through your the information that you share on the forms that we can adequately prepare for you